The Bay of Biscay, July 5, 1942. A full moon hangs over black water, illuminating nothing but the endless procession of waves. Somewhere in that darkness, death is moving. Squadron leader Wiley B. Howell peers through the windscreen of his Wellington bomber, eyes straining against the night. His radar operator has a contact. A German U-boat surfacing 12 miles ahead, racing toward Allied convoys under cover of darkness. But Howell might as well be blind. In 60 seconds, everything will change. The U-boat crew will be dead. And the weapon that kills them will be something the RAF's own engineers had declared physically impossible, an illegal modification, built in secret by a middle-aged pilot who had no right to question the experts, no authority to build it, and no intention whatsoever of asking permission. This is the story of Wing Commander Humphrey de Verde Leigh, the car headlight he wasn't supposed to touch, and the 3 seconds of light that turned the tide of World War II. Act 1. The problem that couldn't be solved. To understand why Britain was losing the Battle of the Atlantic in 1942, you need to understand one simple fact. Darkness was Germany's greatest weapon. The German Type 7 U-boat wasn't particularly impressive on paper. On the surface, it was slow, fragile, and carried only 14 torpedoes. Submerged, it was nearly blind, crawling at 7 knots with batteries that expired after 90 minutes. But at night, these submarines became apex predators. The pattern was devastatingly effective. A U-boat commander would surface under cover of darkness, recharge his batteries, race ahead of Allied convoys at 17 knots, then submerge before dawn to attack from the perfect position. Month after month, German submarines were destroying merchant ships at a rate of 400,000 tons per month. Britain had 12 weeks of food reserves remaining. The U-boats were winning. RAF Coastal Command could find them. That wasn't the problem. Their ASV Mark II radar could detect a surfaced submarine from 10 miles away. The problem lay in those final 30 seconds. By the time a Wellington bomber reached visual range, the U-boat crew would hear the engines, sound the alarm, and the submarine would vanish beneath the waves in under a minute. The attack window lasted exactly 23 seconds, the time between visual acquisition and complete submergence. No crew, regardless of training, could close that gap. The British tried everything. They dropped flares, but the flares warned the submarine and took 18 seconds to illuminate. They installed more powerful engines, but the U-boats heard them from 2 miles away. They developed acoustic torpedoes, but without visual confirmation, the torpedoes missed by hundreds of yards. They trained crews to attack faster, but physics didn't care about training. The statistics were devastating. In all of 1941, RAF Coastal Command managed to sink exactly 1 U-boat in the Bay of Biscay. 1. Meanwhile, German submarines were killing Allied sailors by the thousands. Month after month, Coastal Command crews made perfect radar approaches, arrived precisely on target, and attacked empty water. Squadron commanders filed reports listing probable damage or oil slick observed. The Admiralty knew the truth. They were hitting nothing. By spring 1942, the experts agreed there was no solution. The head of Coastal Command's development unit, the RAF's elite innovation squadron, issued a formal conclusion. Successful night attacks on surface submarines are technically unfeasible given current technological limitations. The case was closed. The problem was deemed unsolvable. Then Humphrey de Verde Leigh walked into a technical briefing and asked an uncomfortable question. The pilot who wouldn't listen. Leigh was 44 years old, ancient by RAF standards. He had learned to fly in the Royal Flying Corps during the First World War, then spent 20 years moving between squadrons, never quite fitting in, never quite getting promoted. He had no formal engineering training, no degree in physics or mathematics. What he had was 1,500 hours flying maritime patrols and a stubborn refusal to accept expert consensus. In January 1942, stationed at RAF Coastal Command Development Unit, Leigh sat through a technical briefing about the night attack problem. The engineering officer explained with charts and equations why it was physically impossible to illuminate a submarine target without warning it first. Flares descended too slowly. Landing lights drew too much power. Flash bombs would blind the pilot. Every option had been tested. Every option had failed. Leigh raised his hand. What if we mounted a powerful searchlight on the aircraft and turned it on at the last second? The room went silent. Then everyone laughed. The engineering officer patiently explained that aircraft generators couldn't power a searchlight strong enough to illuminate a submarine from attack altitude. Even if they could, the weight would make the aircraft unflyable. Even if it didn't, the battery pack required would consume the entire bomb bay. The idea violated 3 separate principles of electrical engineering. Leigh nodded politely. Then he went to his workshop and started building it anyway. He had no authorization, no budget, no team. Just a growing certainty that the experts were wrong. Over the next 4 months, while officially performing his regular duties, Leigh scavenged car headlamps, salvaged aircraft landing lights, and tested increasingly powerful carbon arc searchlights mounted on retractable housings. His fellow officers thought he was having a breakdown. His commanding officer threatened him with disciplinary action for wasting military resources. He had seen something nobody else understood. The mathematics worked. The timing worked. The only missing piece was light. The breakthrough came on a routine night patrol in December 1941. Leigh's radar operator picked up a submarine contact. Leigh began his approach. Slow descent, engines throttled back, perfect course. Then, half a mile from target, his co-pilot spotted a fishing boat with its lights on. For exactly 3 seconds, those lights illuminated the water. In those 3 seconds, Leigh saw the submarine's conning tower, black against moonlit water. Then the fishing boat turned. The lights swept away. Darkness returned. By the time Leigh reached the attack position, the submarine had dived. But Leigh had seen enough. The problem wasn't power or weight or electrical engineering. The problem was duration. Flares burned for 30 seconds, long enough to warn the submarine. What he needed was 3 seconds of intense light, activated at the last possible moment. Back at base, Leigh sketched his first design. A powerful carbon arc searchlight, 24 inches in diameter, mounted in a retractable housing beneath the aircraft. The pilot would keep it off during the entire radar approach, maintaining complete silence and darkness. Then, at exactly 20 feet altitude and 50 yards from target, he would flip a switch. 22 million candle power of light would erupt from beneath the aircraft, turning night into day, freezing the submarine crew in perfect illumination, giving the bombardier precisely 3 seconds to release depth charges before the U-boat could react. 3 seconds. That's all he needed. The next morning, Leigh requested a meeting with his commanding officer and explained his idea. The response was immediate and unequivocal. That is completely illegal under current electrical specifications. Also, physically impossible. Request denied. Humphrey de Verde Leigh did it anyway. Act 3. The illegal weapon. Leigh had no official permission, no budget, and no engineering team. What he had was access to the Coastal Command Development Unit's workshops and grudging tolerance from mechanics who had seen too many good ideas die in committees. He started with car headlamps, modified, rewired, mounted on a wooden frame. Too weak. He moved to aircraft landing lights, brighter but still inadequate. He needed something that could illuminate a target from 200 feet in total darkness. In March 1942, Leigh found it. A 24-inch naval carbon arc searchlight designed for battleships, drawing power that would blow every fuse on a Wellington bomber. The RAF electrical engineers were right about one thing. His aircraft generator couldn't power this device, so Leigh didn't use the generator. He designed a massive battery pack, connected it directly to the searchlight, and installed the entire assembly in a retractable housing that dropped beneath the fuselage like a bomb. The Leigh light, as other pilots mockingly called it, added 800 pounds to the aircraft's weight and reduced the bomb load by 4 depth charges. His commanding officer discovered the project in May 1942. The confrontation was explosive. You've violated 3 separate Air Ministry directives. You've wasted ground resources. You've installed unauthorized equipment on operational aircraft. I should court-martial you. Leigh stood at attention, maintaining perfect military bearing. With respect, sir, I request permission to conduct one operational test. If it doesn't work, I'll personally dismantle every component at my own expense and accept any punishment you deem appropriate. The commanding officer stared at him for a full 10 seconds. One test. You fail, you're done. Clear? Yes, sir. On the night of June 3, 1942, Leigh took off from RAF Chivanor in Wellington, ES-986. His crew thought this would be his last flight before reassignment to a desk job. His co-pilot, an Australian named Alan Triggs, had volunteered specifically to witness what he called Leigh's suicide mission. The flight plan was simple: patrol the Bay of Biscay until radar picked up a submarine, then use the unauthorized searchlight for one attack run. Either the light worked, or Leigh's career ended tonight. At 2:17 a.m., the radar operator picked up a contact 12 miles ahead. Leigh throttled back, began his descent, and approached in total darkness. The submarine was running on the surface, recharging batteries, completely unaware that death was descending from above. Leigh leveled off at 50 feet, lined up on the radar bearing. At 200 yards, he could see nothing, just black water reflecting moonlight. At 100 yards, still nothing. His bombardier called range over the intercom. 70 yards? 60? 50? Leigh reached for the switch. The night exploded into day. 22 million candle power of pure white light erupted from beneath the Wellington, turning the Bay of Biscay into a theater stage. There, frozen in perfect clarity, was the Italian submarine Luigi Torelli. Crew scrambling on deck, conning tower gleaming, wake spreading white behind her. Leigh's bombardier needed no instruction. The depth charges dropped. 3 seconds later, the light switched off. The submarine survived, but crippled, unable to dive, later captured by surface ships. The next morning, Leigh radioed base with 4 words. The device functions perfectly. Act 4, the trial. 2 days later, Leigh stood before a review board at Coastal Command headquarters. Present were his station commander, 2 Air Ministry engineers, a representative from the Admiralty, and Air Chief Marshal Philippe Joubert de la Ferté, the newly appointed Commander-in-Chief of Coastal Command. The mood was hostile. The senior Air Ministry engineer opened the proceedings. Squadron Leader Leigh, your unauthorized modification violates Section 7, Paragraph 4 of Air Ministry Order 1941-6, which expressly forbids installation of non-standard electrical equipment exceeding generator capacity. You've bypassed safety systems, installed unapproved batteries, and created a significant fire hazard. This device should be immediately removed from service. Leigh remained standing. With respect, sir, the device successfully illuminated a submarine target and enabled an attack that damaged an enemy vessel. The Admiralty representative cut in. Damaged, not sunk. You crippled an Italian submarine that was subsequently captured by surface ships. Congratulations. You've created an 800-pound weight penalty that reduces our bomb load to achieve something our destroyers could have accomplished anyway. Because I attacked with training depth charges, Leigh responded. In operational configuration, with full weapon load, the target would have been destroyed. The room erupted. 3 officers began speaking simultaneously. The station commander demanded documentation. The engineers insisted on 3 months of safety testing. The Admiralty representative questioned the entire premise of night attacks. Leigh stood at attention, saying nothing, while his career burned around him. Then Air Chief Marshal Joubert raised one hand. The room went silent. Joubert had been Commander-in-Chief of Coastal Command for exactly 8 days. He had taken command on June 5th, 2 days before Leigh's unauthorized mission. He was a pragmatist who had spent the last week reviewing statistics that made him physically ill. One submarine sunk in the Bay of Biscay in all of 1941. Meanwhile, U-boats were sinking 60 Allied ships per month. Joubert looked directly at Leigh. How many submarines could you sink per month if I gave you 10 aircraft equipped with this device? Leigh didn't hesitate. 5, sir, minimum. The engineer nearly choked. That's absurd. You've conducted exactly 1 test. 6, Joubert interrupted. I'd settle for 6 submarines, 1 per week. He turned to his staff. Gentlemen, I've reviewed Squadron Leader Leigh's service record, 1,500 hours of maritime patrol, 2 years in the development unit, 0 disciplinary incidents until this one. He broke regulations because regulations were preventing him from winning the war. Now you can spend 3 months testing his device, while U-boats sink another 200 merchant ships, or you can install his searchlight on every available Wellington in 172 Squadron and see what happens. I choose option 2. The room erupted again, but this time Joubert let the objections run their course. After 30 seconds, he stood. Everyone went silent. Squadron Leader Leigh, you're hereby promoted to Wing Commander and assigned to command 172 Squadron. You will equip your squadron with your searchlight device and conduct operational patrols beginning no later than July 1st. You will train your pilots personally. You will submit weekly kill reports directly to my office. You will prove your device works, or you will accept full responsibility for wasting resources during wartime. Clear? Yes, sir. Dismissed. As Leigh left the room, the Admiralty representative made one final protest. Sir, with respect, we're basing operational doctrine on one partially successful test of unauthorized equipment designed by an officer with no engineering qualifications. Joubert cut him off. Do you know what our current success rate is for night attacks on submarines? 0.3%. That's not doctrine. That's statistical noise. Wing Commander Leigh just gave us our first confirmed night attack in 2 years. I'll take amateur initiative over expert failure any day. Act 5, The Light of Death. 172 Squadron received its first Leigh light-equipped Wellington on June 15, 1942. By July 1st, 12 aircraft carried the modification. None of the pilots believed it would work. Flight Lieutenant Norman Harrington voiced what everyone was thinking during the briefing. So we're supposed to fly at 50 feet in darkness over open ocean and turn on a spotlight that weighs 800 pounds and might blind us if we look at it wrong. And this is somehow safer than dropping flares? Leigh stood at the front of the briefing room utterly composed. The Leigh light activates for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, you will have perfect visual on a surfaced submarine at attack distance. Your bombardier will have a clear target. The U-boat crew will be frozen in shock, unable to man deck guns or reach the hatch. You will release your depth charges and be gone before they recover. That's the theory. Now we test it. The first kill came faster than anyone expected. On July 5, 1942, exactly 1 month after Leigh's first test, Pilot Officer Wiley B. Howell took off from RAF Chivanor on a routine night patrol. Howell was an American volunteer, 22 years old, flying his 8th mission with 172 Squadron. He had never used the Leigh light in combat. At 11:34 p.m., his radar operator picked up a contact. U-502, a Type YXC submarine commanded by Captain Lieutenant Jürgen von Rosenstiel, returning from a successful patrol in the Caribbean. The submarine was running on the surface, making 17 knots, confident that darkness provided safety. Howell began his approach exactly as Leigh had taught him. Throttle back. Slow descent. Maintain absolute radio silence. At 3 miles, he could see nothing, just darkness and moonlight reflecting on waves. At 1 mile, still nothing. At 200 yards, his navigator called out, "Target should be dead ahead." Howell saw only water. At 50 yards, he flipped the switch. The Leigh light transformed night into noon. There, frozen in perfect illumination, was U-502. Deck crew scrambling, officers diving for the hatch, wake spreading white. Howell's bombardier didn't need instructions. 6 depth charges fell in a perfect stick, bracketing the submarine's pressure hull. 3 seconds later, the light switched off. Howell banked hard right, climbing, already turning for home. Behind him, U-502 broke in half and sank in under 2 minutes. All 52 crew members perished. None survived long enough to send a distress signal. The next morning, Howell landed at Chivanore and filed a report that changed history. Submarine illuminated at 2337 hours, attacked with depth charges, target destroyed, request permission for additional patrols. Leigh read the report 3 times, then walked to Joubert's office and placed it on his desk without comment. Joubert read it once. Then he picked up his telephone and called the Air Ministry. "This is Joubert. I want Leigh lights installed on every Wellington in Coastal Command. Not next month. Now." Act 6, The Tide Turns. The kills accelerated. July 7th, Squadron Leader Jefferson Greswell, Leigh's own co-pilot from the first test, illuminated and attacked U-159. Damaged beyond repair, the submarine limped to port and never returned to sea. July 13th, U-751 caught recharging on the surface, sunk in one attack. July 16th, U-335 destroyed in the Bay of Biscay. No survivors. By August, RAF Coastal Command was sinking more submarines in the Bay of Biscay than in the previous 12 months combined. U-boat commanders stopped surfacing at night. Admiral Carl Dunitz issued emergency orders. All boats will recharge batteries during daylight hours only. Night surface operations are suspended until further notice. But daylight operations meant RAF fighters, radar-equipped ships, and convoys with air cover. The U-boats were trapped. Surface at night and face the Leigh light. Surface by day and face everything else. The statistics tell the story. In the 5 months before the Leigh light became operational, RAF Coastal Command sank 7 submarines in the Bay of Biscay. In the 5 months after, they sank 41. The success rate jumped from 0.3% to 40%. A 100-fold increase from one modification designed by one officer with no engineering degree. On the night of June 7th, 8th, 1944, Flying Officer Kenneth Owen Moore took the Leigh light technology to its ultimate expression. Moore was a 22-year-old Canadian flying a B-24 Liberator from RAF Chivanore on D-Day +1. His mission: patrol the approaches to the English Channel and prevent U-boats from attacking the Normandy invasion fleet. At 9:17 p.m., Moore's radar detected a submarine. He approached in total darkness, activated the Leo light at 50 yards, illuminated U-441, and released 6 depth charges. The submarine sank in 90 seconds. Moore turned for home. Then at 2:39 a.m., exactly 22 minutes later, his radar detected a second submarine. He repeated the approach, activated the light. U-4 and 13 exploded in a fireball visible from 20 miles away. Moore landed at Chivanore with this entry in his combat log. Sighted 2 subs, sank same. For this mission, Moore received the Distinguished Service Order and the American Silver Star. His gunners and navigator received Distinguished Flying Crosses. The Liberator received a fresh coat of paint and a new nickname, Killer Moore. Epilogue: The Light That Saved the World. By the end of the Second World War, Leigh lights had been installed on 1,800 aircraft across RAF Coastal Command, Royal Canadian Air Force squadrons, and U.S. Navy patrol bombers. The device directly contributed to the sinking of 212 U-boats, more than 1/4 of all German submarines lost in the Atlantic. Admiral Karl Dönitz later wrote in his memoirs, "The introduction of searchlight aircraft made it impossible to operate effectively at night. This single weapon, more than any other, forced us to abandon our wolf pack tactics and cost us the Battle of the Atlantic." In 1943, a U-boat commander captured after his submarine was illuminated and destroyed by a Leigh light told his interrogators, "We called it Das Todeslicht, the light of death. You would be running on the surface, confident in the darkness, and then God himself would flip a switch and turn you into a target. It lasted 3 seconds. That was enough." The technology is credited with saving an estimated 400,000 Allied sailors and merchant seamen. Humphrey de Verde Leigh received no public recognition during the war. His invention remained classified until 1946. When the war ended, he continued serving in the RAF, eventually retiring as Air Commodore in 1962. He refused every interview request, declined every invitation to speak at military conferences. When the RAF Museum requested permission to display his original workshop prototype, he wrote back, "The device worked because good men flew it. Tell their stories, not mine." Leigh died on November 19, 2000, at age 83. His obituary in the Times ran 4 paragraphs, mostly about his administrative service in the 1950s. The Leigh light received 1 sentence. But in 2008, the RAF finally installed a permanent exhibition about the Leigh light at the RAF Museum in Hendon. The centerpiece is Leigh's original workshop prototype. The improvised searchlight built from car parts and salvaged landing lights, held together with wire and hope. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "Designed in violation of regulations, built without authorization, installed against direct orders, saved 400,000 lives." Wiley B. Howell, the young American who achieved the first Leigh light kill, later became Captain Howell, commanding the aircraft carrier USS Bennington. In 1965, at a reunion of 172 squadron survivors, he met an aging wing commander, Leigh. "Sir," Howell said, "because of you, I lived long enough to get married. So did 300 other pilots. We owe you everything." Leigh smiled and shook his head. "You owe yourselves everything. I just gave you a better flashlight." The lesson is straightforward. Humphrey de Verde Leigh didn't have an engineering degree, didn't have official authorization, didn't have expert consensus. What he had was a problem that needed solving, and the courage to ignore everyone who said it couldn't be done. The experts were wrong. The regulations were wrong. The established doctrine was wrong. And a middle-aged squadron leader with a car headlight and a conviction was right. Sometimes the most important words in military history aren't "yes, sir" or "following orders." Sometimes they're "watch this."